Hello, 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 and welcome back to the Women of Power show with me, your host, Lovelda Vincenzi. We're doing a special series at the moment. This series is called The Color of Your Voice. After the events of the pandemic earlier on this year and the tragic death of George Floyd, we've seen a huge spotlight turned on diversity, inclusion, and equity. And whilst governments are doing a huge amount to try and transform this, and organizations are doing the same, it's a complex issue and all of us can do our part. So this series is really about exploring what it is each of us can do as individuals to basically make the world a better place to live. I'm joined by two incredible humans who have their fair share of insights and personal experience of being on both sides of the conundrum of diversity and inclusion, and are both incredibly powerful women who are advocates for making a change in the world. So I absolutely could not do this show today without my two guests. We've got Sian Young and Dilys Silla. Hello, ladies.
Hello.
Hello.
How are you?
I'm wonderful.
Good.
Now, I'm a bit concerned about this episode, I'm not going to lie, because it's a delicate topic. Let's not mix our words here. It's a delicate topic, and it's something in fact that I think we can all do more about. But before we dive into it, it'd be useful for guests to have a little bit more of an insight into what you two ladies do outside of passionately talking about this conversation and dropping some nuggets of wisdom that will certainly have us think slightly differently.
Okay.
Dilys, do you want to go first?
Because I'm older. Well, I am a best-selling author of the book Not This Widow. That's my second book. First book, Predator or Prince, How to Find the Man of Your Dreams, Not Your Nightmares. I'm also a transformational life coach. I specialize in marriage, relationships, and I do Christian coaching as well. And I'm a public speaker and a minister as well.
I mean, woman of
So
many
a few
strengths.
things that I do.
Just a handful of things. Gorgeous human on top of that.
Thank you.
And Sian, yourself?
I am a founder of my own business, coaching business and consultancy for sustainable living. So I help CEO founder mums learn how to live a more sustainable life while building their business. And I also am a founder and CEO of the Centre for Sustainable Action, which is as a cooperative built to help small businesses and entrepreneurs come together and implement sustainability and well-being practices within their business. And I'm an international speaker as well, TEDx speaker, and that's me.
Oh, wonderful.
And mother.
And all-round beautiful
And mother.
human. And mother of a beautiful, beautiful little daughter. So episode 1 in this series, I wanted to kick off at the high level, right? So we know that in order to interpret the world, we as humans have had to group things together because otherwise it would be too damn confusing. There's just far too much information flying at us at all times. And whilst that is often a very helpful place for us to be, it does cause significant problems when it comes to equity, inclusion, diversity, and actually being able to see people. So on the one hand, we can say, if we group together red means bad, because we've got red stoplights, and so when we see something that's of a bright red color, we see that as danger in most parts of the world, not all. And then we might look at another situation and see, for example, we might then group together that it's warm in certain parts of the world and it's cold in others. Then we start getting into racial stereotypes, and some of these are helpful and useful to a point, and they have some validity. So we may say things like people from an Indian background are very good at technology because they tend to be, not all, but we may also then think people of an East Asian background, very intelligent people, very smart people, British, very posh, but then we start getting into things like group of young black youth, dangerous. Yeah. So when do stereotypes go from something that's helpful for us, and I think we all do it, by the way, I don't think there's anybody who's immune to it, we have to process the world. But when does a stereotype go from something that's helpful for processing to something where we need to be aware of some of the belief systems that we may be speaking into, right? Such as the latter, where it may not be, none of them are helpful, to be honest, because if you're from an Indian descent and everybody thinks you're super clever, but that's really, you don't want to be a doctor or a lawyer, you're more of an artiste, then that's not going to help you either. So when does it stop being helpful for us to disseminate the world?
I think it stops being helpful when you have evidence to the contrary. I think it's that simple. So I remember back in the day when I used to do work for the local authorities, where I used to do customer service training. And there was this little exercise that I used to do where I'd have 10 questions and I'll say, guess this about me. What kind of house do I live in? What kind of car do I drive? If I was shipwrecked on an island, what 3 things couldn't I live without? Shockingly, there were people that were extremely accurate, which was really scary. And some people were way off.
Yeah.
And I said, there's nothing wrong with that. Exactly what you said. We need to be able to process the world by having these things in place. But it becomes dangerous when you have evidence of the contrary. And funnily enough, I actually did use race as an example. So, being, from Generation X, I would say, to my group of delegates, just imagine that for the first thing you've ever seen of black people is the Broadwater Farm riots, where you've got, Keith Blakelock being, stabbed, and there's fires being, set, and, cars are alight, and all of this stuff. And that's the impression that you have of black people. That's all you know.
Yeah.
And then something happens and you're now posted to go and work in the Caribbean. You get to the airport and everybody's kind of like normal, doing what they did in Heathrow or Gatwick or wherever it is you flew out from. You see people driving their cars, they're standing at the curb, they're crossing the road. Would you still be justified in thinking these people are crazy, barbaric animals? No, you wouldn't. And at the point at which you have that evidence to the contrary, and you are still holding on to that initial impression, that becomes a conscious bias that you have, or prejudice that you have towards a group of people for your own reasons. That's got nothing to do with the initial feelings that you had that was driven by ignorance, or because you had nothing to contradict or to challenge that. So I think it's just evidence to the contrary.
But how do we find these differences? So some of me goes, I feel like I was fortunate. I grew up, and Sean, I know you've traveled a lot as well. I grew up from a really multicultural background. And so I had the benefit of, as you say, Dilys, being able to see different. I grew up in a developing country, and I remember my geography teacher thinking I grew up in a bleeding rainforest up a tree. I lived in a city, y'all.
Yeah.
I lived in a city. But I grew up in Papua New Guinea, so that was his impression, having known no better. But for those people who haven't traveled the world broadly, and Sean, you're based in the UK, from a mixed, your family is eclectic in background. How do we where we are right now is people who are living naively from a space of, let's just call it ignorance, because there isn't, when you've got that alternative, then I can understand you saying, okay, cool, sure. It's now a conscious stereotype. How do we know when it's an unconscious stereotype?
Well, I have an example from my grandfather, who's 92, right? And he said to me, because my husband is black, Caribbean, he says to me, does his hair grow? Right?
Yeah.
He didn't mean that in any bad way, but he's never been exposed to anybody in his circle or his life of a person of color, right? And that will never happen. You can't just go out there and slip yourself into a different community. But what you can do is educate yourself. There's a ton out there, and schools need to educate. I mean, if we go right back to the beginning, the education system does not set us up very well to not have all these biases and opinions of people that are not, like you said, they're not founded in knowledge. And when you know better, you should do better.
Yeah.
Right? And there's no excuse now with the internet, with everything going on, for somebody not to know.
Yeah.
Right? So it's about identifying your bias and being okay with, like, I mean, I'm a white chick who's lived in the UK. I was brought up with all the knowledge that the UK gifted me. Okay? And I have, like I said, a Caribbean husband, and I've said things in my marriage that he's went, just a minute, and he's educated me where that actually came from, right? And when George Floyd died, I immediately just dove into history. I went right back to 1274, and I know we're going to have a resource for that series that I created that is all about the history and where it come from, and the nuances and the reasons why we have all these biases in our head that are doing nothing but separating us. And when we're separated, when we're divided, we fall. When we're divided, we struggle. And we don't need to struggle because collectively we're a very powerful human race. So that's my take on it.
Why do you think people just aren't more curious? Because I had a similar sort of thing. My husband's Italian, and not a sort of person, very open. You both know him very well. He's a very open sort of individual. But he grew up in Italy, and whilst he's always had friends from multiple different backgrounds, I think until he married me, his understanding of my culture and my background, some of the unique challenges I face being in a black female body, just had not materialized before. And it's not because he's a bad person, because I think we can hear quite wide and proud about those people who they've got no interest in getting to know another group of people, and they need to just not be here or whatever. So let's put them to a side, because I just think that's a whole nother space. But there's a whole raft of people that started coming out in very unique ways when the George Floyd death happened. And there were a number of people, I remember having so many conversations with people who just didn't know. They just didn't get that it was scary. And I remember saying to a friend of mine that I was very aware from a very young age that I was probably going to have to work that little bit harder because I'm female and I'm black. And this shocked her, because it just wasn't something that would have crossed her mind before. And it's not because of anything else apart from the fact that she was in a different space. So where does, it's one thing to say we should go out and be more curious and explore, but let's face it, we're busy. We're running our lives.
I don't think it's that difficult, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think when the opportunity presents itself, shut up and listen.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, because it's not your lived experience, but it's mine. And I think what's most infuriating is when you are trying to tell me what my life looks like.
Yeah.
That's when I have a problem. When I'm saying to you that as a black woman, when I'm in the office, I can't, under any circumstances, just be me. I can't just be upset. I can't just be angry. Whatever emotion that I feel or express that's not happy clappy and all singing or dancing is aggression.
Yeah.
I am 6'1" in heels. Yes, this is 100% of my fabulousness.
Oh, yeah, 100% fabulous, girl.
But this here is to be afraid of.
Yeah.
The number of times I've been told I'm intimidating. I was even told I was intimidating because I was tall. Now, I said to my manager at the time, unless I'm going to come into work in a wheelchair or coming into work on my knees, what do I do?
What can you do?
So I think in terms of people educating themselves, you educate yourselves when you come across an opportunity. What I'm finding, and you see this a lot on social media, when you challenge or you say, well, actually, this is what it feels like for me.
Yeah.
You're basically gaslit. You're being told, sometimes blatantly, sometimes quite subtly, that it's all in your head. It can't be that bad. Are you sure it's because of this? I'm grown. Trust me, I know what my feelings tell me.
Yeah.
And I have no problem being able to interpret those feelings or being able to read the room or what the situation is telling me. But we're constantly being told, no, it's not like that. It's this. Don't you think it's that? And it's frustrating. So if you come across a situation where, you don't know, and the person is telling you, this is how I feel, just listen.
Come as an open vessel. Come as an open vessel. There's something you said there, Dilys, that really struck me in terms of, because we talk about, we're here talking about stereotypes and the impact of them, and, being tall and being, I think the bit that really struck me was the impact it has, because I think sometimes, as we're here talking about stereotypes, I'm like, well, hold on a minute. If we think about it, when you say, I don't feel like I could be the full version of me, because the world has, based upon stereotypical views of tall, black, female, and whatever else goes with it. In the office, mother, whatever else goes with that, based upon certain boxes that I tick. The world is anticipating that I'm going to behave in a certain way, or interpreting my behavior differently.
Yes.
Or your presence.
Or your presence
Just
differently.
your presence.
Yes.
My son, he had an experience uni, college is in America, and he said something so sad to us. He just said, I realize now that it doesn't matter where I go in this world, I'm black. And he's mixed ethnicity, right? But he's considered black because he's got Afro hair. And that it just made me so sad that this young boy who's working so hard and is so awesome and can be treated and can think that thought at 18 years old, that it doesn't matter where he goes.
You're just.
You're that's it. You know, and that was when he was being overtly treated as black.
So what really strikes me in terms of, as I'm sitting here going, well, I'll be honest, I believe all of us are a tiny bit racist, just a little bit, in some way, shape or form. We've all got our prejudices, we've all got stereotypes that we feed into, and some of them are just by default. And
that have been fed into us.
That have been fed into us, that we've absorbed ourselves.
But we can unlearn it. And at which point you've unlearned it, you're not a tiny bit, because you've unlearned it.
Yeah.
Do you see where I'm coming from? You can unlearn the behavior. You can say, oh, I didn't realize that this is what it was. I just wasn't aware. But it's at the point at which you are not willing to unlearn, where you are holding on for dear life, even though you have evidence to the contrary, to say, I'm still holding on to this.
So,
but for what?
What is someone holding on to, do you think? What is someone holding on to if they have all this evidence? They have so many calls all over, especially, like you said, with the George Floyd situation, kicking off. Then what is stopping someone from changing, I wonder? Because I know I get embarrassed sometimes when I say something in my marriage and it's wrong for my husband because of the history that he has lived. I mean, his great-grandfather was an overseer. It was that close to his family, what he's been through. And I feel embarrassed. Just like when I was naughty in front of my nan and granddad, I would cry, I would feel so bad, right? Then I would learn from that and I would move forward. So I want people who are watching this to question, what is it that's so scary? Because when you step past that and grow into that new knowing and new knowledge, you get to have amazing life and amazing relationships. So let go.
But that's subjective. Because there's such a thing as willful ignorance. And many of the conversations I've had around this is the person has to see the benefit in change. If I am living a life of privilege and power, and there is no impact on my life by behaving a certain way, then what you have to appeal to such a person goes beyond that. Then what you need to appeal to is their humanity. That's what you have to tap into to say, as a person who considers themselves, I'm sure, as a good person, a person of integrity, a person of compassion, a person who is loving, a husband, a father, a wife, a this and whatever. When you look at your human side, your humanity, do you think when all is said and done that it's right that this person or these group of people should be treated or should feel like this? Because when we get into the debate of black versus white, yellow versus green, blue versus yellow, no one gives a damn.
Nobody wins.
It's really about appealing to the humanity. What does it benefit me? Not, money-wise or status, but as a person. When I sleep at night, have I been a good person? And yes, even within that argument, there are some people that don't give a damn about being a good person. But like you said, they are not the people that I personally would be appealing to because you're a lost cause. But when you have people that are on the precipice, or people that are neither here nor there, or in that place of ignorance, willfully or otherwise, it's their humanity that one has to appeal to be able to tap into that which needs to change.
As you're talking, Dilys, what occurs to me is it sits it sits almost as the conversation, and stick with me, around the planet, in so much as people don't necessarily feel like I'm a poor contributor to sustainability. You know, I'm not inherently bad. You know, we're not here to say you're inherently bad. And it's not that I don't want to live in a planet that's going to be looked after for years, but it's just easier for me to buy the cheap stuff that comes wrapped in plastic. So that's what I'm going to do.
Yeah, I think it's a great example. I think it's a great example.
Yeah, well, in sustainability, I've been trying to bring sexy to it, you know, and make it a little bit fun. And, you know, I literally saved £21,000 in 3 years. So if you want a little plug for sustainability there, it's good.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a similar sort of thing. If you're, you know, you want a healthy planet, we've each got to do a little bit to move towards that. If you fundamentally believe that each person should have the ability to show up 100% as who they are,
but the narrative
without fear, then we've each got to do our little piece towards that too,
100%.
and acknowledge where we're looking at somebody and going, oh shoot, Dilys, you know, I'm feeling a bit intimidated. Well, why?
Yeah.
Was it something she said?
Exactly. Oh gosh.
There's a narrative. There's a narrative has been fed to people to have fear that by opening your life to other humans, that you've got, like, you're going to lose something. You're going to not get that job, or you're going to lose that pay, or there's all these silly narratives that are happening. And the minute you take a breath, get over the fear of all that disinformation in your brain, then you realize that there's a massive world of collaboration out there with everybody globally if we stopped with all this nonsense. And that's partly why this series is happening, is to say, take that breath, just feel the fear and do it anyway, you know, feel the fear.
But I mean, or just
up.
look at your shelves in Tesco and see how much food isn't on the shelf because after Brexit, because people go back to their own bloody country, after all of that, we're now asking people, can you come back from your country and drive our trucks? That's the reality of this foolishness. Let's be honest.
I think she just said it.
You know, that's the reality. Yeah. So no man is an island, and there's that saying is there for a reason.
Yeah.
Even when you go down on Friday night and go and have curry, where do you think curry comes from?
Yeah.
It's not from Yorkshire.
No.
So
they don't have the spices in Yorkshire.
Exactly. So whichever way you look at it, we are all connected. Even the clothes that you wear. Even the clothes that you wear, and sorry,
the air that we breathe.
My microphone. But yeah, you know, we have to understand that there is a benefit in being tolerant.
Yeah. Understanding beyond tolerant. You know, I think tolerant is putting up with somebody, but having an understanding.
But I mean,
tolerant is a good starting point.
No, but I mean tolerance
in humanity.
No, I mean tolerance further than just I'm just tolerating.
Yeah.
Tolerance as in creating that space and understanding that, look, if three of us want to sit here, you might have to move up there and I might have to move up here, and it's okay.
Or
even if it doesn't feel totally comfortable.
Yeah.
Dilys has to have her chair lower, and mine has to be really high because I'm like totally short. Okay.
That was fun, you know, when your feet are swinging and trying to raise the
So before we started filming, Sean's chair was a little bit too high, and she was doing.
So I was actually going to raise mine. I'm like, listen, you're never catching me. I ate my greens, yeah. So how's that for sustainability?
Oh, so you didn't eat enough greens as a kid. So what can we do? One area I kind of want to dive into a little bit is we're talking about humanity, and so I think what would be interesting to understand, because if I've got nothing to lose, then what is the impact I'm creating?
That's right.
Right? So let's say I'm in the space of privilege and it doesn't bug me, you know.
Exactly, yeah.
Nothing happens to me because somebody else's experience of the world is a little bit tougher. And we're all going to have it tough in various different ways, but there are some areas of toughness which as humans we create for ourselves, let's be honest. So I'm kind of interested to hear what are some of the impacts on the other side of that. So, you know, what is the lived reality of somebody like Dilys, or like your husband, for example, Sean, or like myself, where what we're seeing is there are certain things, ways in which we interact with the world in order to compensate. I think sometimes it's helpful to hear it's not impacting me, but by virtue of who I'm being or my lack of interest right now, I'm perpetuating what? What am I perpetuating?
I'd like to speak for the conversations I have with my husband, with my sons, who are both mixed as well. And it is so tiring. It is so tiring. I mean, if you imagine a trigger on in their head every single day, and it's got to be, no matter how you feel, he has to pull it all in, and he needs to be better than everyone else. He needs to choose every single word extremely carefully. He walks through places where he's the only black person because of how far he's managed to get. But the cost on his health of constantly having to be that tightly wrapped every single day and never step out of line. Like, for instance, when I was attacked when I was 7 months pregnant by someone who was attacking him because of his race. They didn't care that I was clearly carrying a child, so he had to protect me, but he wasn't allowed to get upset. He wasn't allowed to do anything really to protect me, because if he did, he's also trained. So if he did, he'd be immediately the one who was in the wrong. And he knows, as a black man, immediately he's the one in the wrong, no matter what the situation, no matter the person who attacked us came to us, like firing at his wife and his child. The repercussions for him after that of not being able to protect me and his unborn child, it just was so deep, and it took such a long time and a lot of support for him to even say that he just felt so bad, because his instinct is to protect his family, and he wasn't allowed that instinct. And even when it was a couple of instances that happened, he was not allowed to get upset, and he had to stay so tightly wrapped. His blood pressure, his immunity, the effects on him of daily having to put up with this sort of stuff on his health, it's just wrong. It's wrong.
I mean, I can relate to that because I don't work in an office anymore for some of these very reasons. I can't. I absolutely cannot. I would rather starve, because being in an office environment and the things that I had to suffer and I was subjected to, I had no help. I had no voice. Even when I cried out, I actually went as far as assuming the identity of a Jewish woman, sending an anonymous email. Well, it wasn't anonymous. I had a name. Sharon Goldberg was the name that I used. And I remember, sending an email to one of the leaders of a local authority where I had been, subjected to the most disgusting behavior over a sustained period of time. And the moment they found out that it was me, the chief executive, everything just died a death.
Sad.
It's terrible.
If you want to talk about humanity,
well, I mean, after that, I still went to, I couldn't work for about a year because I was suffering from PTSD as a result of that experience. For the first time, I was put on sleeping tablets. Never had that in my life. And I remember going for an interview. I was booked to go for the interview, and I just had a complete meltdown. This is 3 years later. I just couldn't do it. And it just got to a point where I thought, no more.
And could you imagine having to go to work under that kind of pressure constantly, every day, having to provide for your family?
That wasn't me every day. Every day.
Just the pressure on your body, on your mind. And then you're supposed to show up not be aggressive because you're tall. You're supposed to crawling on your knees and just be.
That was always the go-to. The go-to was always even when I didn't say anything, even when I was in a situation in an office where I had one lady, and I use that term really loosely, standing at one end of the office screaming at me, multiple witnesses, who was called into the office and told, well, you are quite intimidating. It wasn't her.
And that's exactly what I said about when we were being attacked, blatantly attacked when I was pregnant. I normally am fast on my feet, right? You start, I'm gone. You turn around and I'm gone. But I was 7 months pregnant. I couldn't run. And my husband was not allowed to protect me in the way that he wanted to, because he's black, and he knew that would mean him in the jail, and the whole career that he'd built, everything he'd worked so hard for would be gone in a second. And that has happened to you as well.
Yeah, I don't work I just can't. I was forced to have to start working, for myself, which, is not a bad thing, but the reasons behind it weren't great. And I wish I could say that it was just a one-off.
Yeah.
But it wasn't. And it was constant, it was consistent, it was merciless. I mean, even when I reached out to say, look, I've not been paid, that still didn't give me a voice. The agency that I worked for were told, oh, well, she left here very aggressive, caused so much disruption and upset. Nothing of that sort happened. But I'm black, aren't I? I'm this big, tall woman. So it was easy to say that that was what was happening.
Can I just flip that around, right? Imagine I was the one who was here and you were the woman you mentioned across the other end and screaming at me, right? Imagine if you were screaming at me and I was the woman who was, you know, like the one pulled into the office. Like if you flip that scene around, like how can somebody come to work and like for me, like I could start getting aggressive. I know I could, right? I know that I could start going, oh my God.
Yeah,
and like all that sort of
cried,
stuff.
so. And
it would be fine. It would be like, and I would get away with that, right? So I would get away with being snidey and aggressive and microaggressions all day, every day.
Yeah.
And then somebody else taking the blame.
100%.
Right?
That's
and
it.
then when you're looking at the cost of that, right? The cost of that is you've got to live with yourself, first of all. And also, you are missing out on so much that comes, like I said before, with the collaboration of everybody. We want workplaces to be a collaboration of minds. Like if you want to make more profit, you want to get ahead in business and have a better business. You know this world is a big place. The UK is very small, right? And do you think the rest of the world is white? Probably not. So if you want to have a good career and a good life, then you need to start opening up, you know?
I mean, I'm loving this conversation and I wish I could say I was surprised, but it saddens me. And for some people, some of these stories might be a complete and utter shock, but I think it's important, not for the story, y'all. Don't be feeling these are two powerful women. They're fine. They're fine. Okay? They're fine
now.
No need to be. But I just think for those people who perhaps are thinking this isn't really that big of a deal, or it doesn't have an impact for me. I think it's understanding. You know, it's helpful to see what the lived reality of somebody else is, which is, you know, effectively living under a sustained amount of stress and having to make decisions that you would make not having the option to make the same decisions.
Absolutely.
Or understanding that if I react in the way that
normal,
we would say classify as a normal human reaction because of the body I was born into, that is going to be interpreted in a slightly different way. And I think understanding that, I'm hoping will open people up to wanting to just do a little bit more personally, right? Just a little bit more to go, oh shoot, maybe I should, you know, what is it, I suppose to wrap, because girl, we got so deep today.
Yeah.
But what are some practical things that anybody who's been listening today where they thought, that's a really different perspective, or it hadn't quite occurred to me that these sorts of this is the way different people are really having to live. And I know we focused on, you know, black and white, but I mean, there's different experiences for people from different cultures. Where, you know, if I were to be sitting here talking to somebody from Eastern Europe, they would have their own stories about what that would look like versus somebody who's Chinese. You know, we've all got our...
But even then, Lovelda, where they would have an advantage is until they open their mouth. Until they open their mouth, sounding like an Eastern European, we're not going to have the same experience.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I don't get to hide.
I
don't get to hide this. So if we're in a crowd and there's trouble, let's say that, you know, the police get a call that there is some trouble at some party. They are not going to be able to pick out the Eastern European over me, the black woman.
Yeah.
And that's the difference. So yes, you're right that the experiences are different
There'll be
for those reasons.
There'll be different types of experiences.
Different
types of experiences. And we're talking about stereotypes. So I just wanted to say they're going to have a different type of stereotype that's going to manifest in a different sort of way and have different implications. But the bottom line is, regardless of the stereotype, the person living with that is adjusting a part of them on a continuous basis or having to counterlever that such that they can be accepted in the same sort of way.
just live,
so
yeah.
what can we as individuals do that would help to mitigate against or shift some of these stereotypes?
I think, first of all, like you mentioned earlier, listen.
Yeah.
When somebody of colour is talking to you, telling you what it's like on the daily for them, like, listen, because it is like that, right? And that's the first
But you know
step,
one
is
thing that I would
listening.
love every white person in the whole of the world to never say? Stop pulling the race card. It has got to be the most ridiculous, most insulting, the most stupid comment you can ever make. Because what you're actually saying is you're exposing yourself. What you're saying is, I've heard this old chestnut before. And what that means is you heard that old chestnut and you didn't pay attention. That's why you're having to hear it over and over again, that now you think it's just a card we are pulling from a pack that you hold. I don't hold that pack, you do. So when you're saying you're pulling the race card, it's the only card you gave me.
Yeah.
So quite frankly, it's not a phrase that whenever I hear it, it infuriates me because it says so much about you. You're saying that you've heard black people complain about racism so many times that you're now seeing it as just something that they just say because we're so bored. We've got nothing better to do with our life and our time.
Oh, girl.
That needs to stop.
Oh, girl.
Well,
so we're going to leave you with, because we is well over time. This is my good conversation. You've been listening to, ladies, thank you so much for your insights. I mean, we got a couple more episodes coming, but we could literally sit here and talk about this for the whole day. There's so many different nuances in the conversation. And I'm hoping for those of you who've been listening to this show, if you've loved it, please disseminate this information and this knowledge. If there's something that struck you, leave it in the comments. Let us know what really sat with you, because we really want to identify the color of your voice as we sit here identifying the color of our voices. And if we can neutralize that, or better yet, make it so multicolored and like a rainbow, I think we'll all be living in a much better space. So this is the Lovelda Show, Women of Power, and this is part of the Color of Your Voice series. Please leave a comment, share this, and until next time, have a fabulous rest of your day, wherever you are in the world. Ciao for now.